on the safe and the hygienic management of menstrual health, or on how it relates to the reproductive health in the life cycle of a woman. And when it comes to products too, the focus has been largely been on pads, and there's really been not any big significant effort made to address the varied needs based on needs of the woman or on the economic and social context. So these are some of the challenges. And the other one, of course, is the other challenge is that the health system or even the government systems operate often in silos. So if it is provision of sanitary pads, it's either a education program or it is something that it is done in the adolescent clinics, or it's not even integrated with other VHND or other programs very often. So these are some of the challenges that are faced even in normal times. But these challenges have become much more severe in the current situation. And so it becomes very difficult for a woman to make an informed choice both in the normal time and in the current situation. But there have been organizations which have been trying to address this, and they've been trying to reach out to different vulnerable groups and ensure convergence and on meeting different needs. And we're going to be hearing from 3 of them today. And so these organizations have actually helped to change this narrative and bring solutions for enhanced access to on both information and products, more so in the current situation as well. And we're going to be hearing from them about how they have made an effort to increase the reach, especially to the groups who are not reached, expand the basket of choices to enable an informed choice, convergence in services, the sustainability from an environmental perspective. I'm going to briefly introduce the 3 of them, and then post that I will be posing questions to them for them to answer. Sumati consults with the SR Foundation on Gender and Impact. She's an incoming Schwarzman Scholar, current Resolution Fellow, and the co-founder of a social venture aimed at eliminating the stigma associated with women's reproductive health in India. Sumati is a recipient of the most prestigious accolade a young person can ever receive for their social action or humanitarian work, the Diana Award. She is an Alibaba Global Dreamer, Unleashed Talent, and HPAIR Scholar. Sumati hails from Uttarakhand, India. Lara, a senior executive in Tata Trust, having specialized in social work, counseling, and psychology, Lara has been working in the development programs of Tata Trust for the last 5 years. She initiated the menstrual hygiene management program under the Tata Water Mission, which is working on normalizing menstruation in rural areas across 8 states and has reached over 1 lakh male and female community members. She has also been leading the mission's behavior change communication initiative through digital media as physical outreach has become constrained under COVID. Dilip is a co-founder and CEO at Sukhi Bhava Foundation, a behavior change focused organization working towards making menstruation a non-issue in marginalized communities across Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, and West Bengal. Sukhi Bhava, they build evidence-based solutions at the Period Innovation Lab and scale these solutions through the Period Fellowship and an incubator program called the Periodpreneurship. Thank you all. Thank you, Sumati, Lara, and Dilip for being here. And can we start with each one of you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, this question is posed to the 3 of you. I would like each one of you to briefly introduce about your organization and your work on menstrual health and the communities that you work with and any specific groups that you are focused on, the geographies, and what is the approach that each one of you follow. We start with you, Sumati, and then Lara, and then Dilip.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Ram. So I work with SR Foundation on their menstrual health and hygiene initiative. SR Foundation has been working since 2011. We are present in 8 states, work very closely with 500 villages across India. We launched our menstrual hygiene program called Sahaj earlier this year. with a frame of mind where we wanted to ensure that we can bring systematic change to the menstrual hygiene ecosystem. So we are leveraging digital solutions and a more comprehensive approach. Before this, we have worked in vulnerable communities, especially Naxalite areas in Jharkhand, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, and now are trying to reach more and more geographies, including Jammu and Kashmir, which is a conflict zone. And a lot of our focus is also on Maharashtra at the moment. And the approach that we follow has been definitely something that we have developed over time through experience. Being a peer educator myself, we believe that, girls and end users are the focal point of all our initiatives. So no decisions about them are made without them. And all our activities include inputs from them. The framework we follow is a very close partnership between government agencies, non-profit and on-ground actors, and private institutions like ESSAR.
All right. This is Lara. Good morning, everyone. So with regard to the Tata Trust, we started our menstrual hygiene management program in 2017 with 2 small pilots that we started off in Uttarakhand and Rajasthan. After that, 2018 onwards, we used all our learnings from those pilots and we started scaling up our efforts to another 8 states. So currently we are working in Maharashtra, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, UP, Jharkhand, Assam and Karnataka. And we've covered around 1 lakh women and adolescent girls and around 10,000 men in the last 2 years. We focus a lot with the marginalized communities in extremely interior regions of our geographies. And we primarily work through 2 modules. We have a schools and a community module where we work with adolescent girls and boys in schools and men and women in the community. We try to cover the entire, our program is designed in a way that we cover the entire MHM value chain, which touches upon awareness, access, usage, and disposal. And yeah, so that's largely the entire program that we work with. Thank you.
Interesting. And Dilip?
Hello everyone, I'm Dilip. I'm co-founder of Sukhi Bhava, a Bangalore-based not-for-profit. We've been working for 6 years now. And we specifically have been working on behavioral change and ending stigma around menstruation. That's been a work for the last 6 years, and we work with about 162,500 plus women across 9 states in India. Currently, we're working in Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, and just started working in West Bengal through a period Pratika. So, although our work is specifically focused on behavior change with COVID, we have made some serious pivots on how we look at work. So when we did the needs assessment in the first 15 days of the lockdown, there were 3-4 major insights that really drove us to these pivots. One of them was, what we basically did was we made our frontline workers' phone numbers as the helpline numbers within the communities we work with, and ran a 15-day challenge of running a helpline of disseminating information and receiving calls for concerns around mental health and sexual reproductive health. And it was a very small pilot, ran for about 2 weeks, and we got about 260 calls in specifically 6 different communities. And half of them were about critical menstrual health and sexual reproductive health concerns. And what this made us realize was narrow down the needs to 4 specific needs. One was need for access to credible information around menstrual health and sexual reproductive health. And 2 is because there was lockdown and there was restrictions on movement, women were not able to actually access hospitals and clinics around the sexual reproductive health concerns that were rising up. So, and our frontline workers were not in a place to actually answer and respond to some of the conditions with which the women were calling. So we realized that there's a need for access for credible health professionals that are available virtually. And third is, as we all know, there's been a massive issue around access to products. And when we actually try to understand more about the products, what we realize it's not just to do with menstrual health products, but also with contraceptives. So there should be a better way where we're able to make this information available for the women and girls we work with was the third one. And fourth one was men have a serious role to play right now. And if we don't involve men and boys in this conversation properly, we will just be moving back our agenda by a few years in time. So based on this, there are 4 interventions that we've come up with. One is a helpline, a national-wide helpline, a centralized helpline where anyone and everyone can call and ask questions around knowledge around menstrual.
Dilip, that was going to be my second question, but you've already kind of jumped the thing. But yes, we'll come to that. But it's quite interesting that you work across geographies, conflict zones, and most importantly, you work with men, and which is a very, very interesting thing that has kind of come through with all of your presentations. So I would like to hear from each one of you on the platforms that you use to facilitate the access to information with your target groups. And given that, and I know Dilip had already said some of it, but I would come back to you again, Dilip. Given that physical distancing has been a major issue with the current situation, how have you actually been reaching out to your groups with whom you work with in the current time? Sumati, and then we go to Lara, and then Dilip.
Okay, great. Yeah. I think at SR Foundation, we had a vision from the very beginning that we want to build a very agile and scalable solution for menstrual hygiene and health information dissemination. And the work had started a while ago, actually. We built a platform called Sahej, which is a 360-degree comprehensive digital platform where you can get anything and everything you want to know about menstrual hygiene on the platform. So right from credible sources of information, chat and audio-based helpline, educational videos from renowned gynecologists, also a safe space to share your experiences, and also lastly, a marketplace where you can purchase products agnostic of their kind and brands and manufacturers, but also have a space where you can access these products. And not only restricting to menstrual hygiene products, but also making available disposable methods for disposal and incinerators and the likes and so on. And it's very early on, even before I think the lockdown was exercised in India, that we started getting distress messages on the chat helpline, and realized that there's going to be a massive need to mobilize this information even more than we were doing before. We quickly started identifying community grassroots actors and youth volunteers who could help us and become agents of change on the ground in the communities where they are at the moment. And information onboarding on the application was done on of course the hygiene aspect of it. A lot of attention has been paid to personal hygiene, and menstrual hygiene somehow has been an undertone in all of this. However, it is more important than ever to talk about these issues, and we've leveraged this application which is available on web and Android to be able to disseminate these particular messages.
Okay, great. Lara?
I'd like to share something. So Tata Trust, as part of this entire COVID relief thing, we had a very extensive program that we carried out over a 12-day period in April. We covered almost 80 lakh people with regard to COVID messaging. So we used various different channels to disseminate that, because that was in the early days of the lockdown. So we had to use the digital platform. So our learnings from that is what we are trying to now shape into our MHM strategy to reach out to the communities, because like I mentioned, we're working in interior rural areas. So during the COVID relief thing, we tried out different kind of tools that we used. So definitely we considered WhatsApp as one way of disseminating information, and we developed videos. So we wanted to develop videos which were, powerful, but also having some kind of a connect with the community. So we tried out 3 different types of videos. We looked at looping in regional celebrities. So we had like Santhali celebrities or Gujarati celebrities. Then we reached out to even national level celebrities, some of them. So, and in the regional languages and dialects, we tried to develop videos of them to spread this message. Another thing that we tried out is we tried to look at so we have our associate organizations, the trust associate organizations spread in all our geographies. So we looked at identifying people from our communities who are working at the front line with the beneficiaries. So we actually got videos developed of them, because there is a trust factor involved in that. The community automatically can relate to these people. So we developed the team videos through that. We also developed some animation videos to further strengthen the message. And also what we had done was, through our health team, we had identified 5 key behaviors that we wanted to just push. So every day, it was like a 12-day campaign with alternate days information going on particular key behaviors. So videos was one thing which we tried to do through WhatsApp. A lot of times videos does not necessarily, people don't have the internet bandwidth to do that. So we tried audio visuals as well. So audios were going around. We also tried IVR technology, and a great insight that we got from IVR. So though our scripts were all around 2.5 minutes, we realized through our IVR and feedback mechanism calls that a person's attention span was most sharp during the first 80 seconds. So then we realized the importance of, actually putting in the key information in the first 80 seconds and how we are going to shape that. So that was another great learning we had. We also looked at developing a helpline similar to that, but of course it was in the context of COVID and seeing how that can happen. And there were different infographics, etc. So now we are using the learnings, etc. from our COVID releasing, and we are looking at MHM going ahead. So of course, one major thing is we have to look at, once the lockdown is lifted in certain areas and restrictions are listed, there will be some people who will start going and working with the communities, but it would be in much smaller numbers. So maybe our community resource people would be working with 5 or 6 people. So we have to provide them with digital tools. So we are looking at investing in tablets, etc., and of course a whole set of digital films which would help them further, because they may have to do now more number of sessions in a day with smaller groups of people. So there has to be some way we can equip them to continue doing that. And of course, another very interesting thing that we started and we did yesterday for MH Day as well is we developed a cloth pad video in different regional dialects again. And we spread that video everywhere, how to stitch your own cloth pad at home. And we had thousands of women yesterday engaging with us to stitch their own cloth pads at home. And it was a really good this thing. So it touches upon that issue of the supply aspect as well. So we are looking at continuing that as well, along with more digital tools that we are going to focus on the key MHM behaviors that MHM key messages that we've identified.
Okay. So we have Sumati who talked about the app and using that for marketplace. Then we have you who have used WhatsApp and videos, and especially using regional languages and regional celebrities. Dilip, you did mention about helpline and other thing. I would like you to also expand on what you said earlier.
Definitely. Like I was saying, the helpline has 2 parts associated with it. One is the push messaging and 2 is the pull messaging, where push messaging involves only audio-based calls. Like, for example, before COVID, we were going to the ground and delivering 4 sessions for a given group of women. Now what we're trying to do is build a database of phone numbers in the communities we are working with or a partner organization is working with. Take their consent and schedule calls at regular intervals, like 4 p.m. every day, where they get these 1 minute, 2 minute, 5 minute calls about key messaging around menstrual health. And at the end of this, they have a call to action saying that if you have any further queries, then you can call this number. And they can call back, and a frontline worker who's now the helpline assistant will answer the call. And if it's beyond a knowledge-based question, and if it's something to do with a health condition, then the call is diverted to a gynecologist, where we're setting up a gynac helpline as well, where the gynecologist is able to direct them on the next steps that have to be taken. While this entire intervention is focused only on women and girls, there is also a parallel men and boys intervention that is being piloted, where we are promoting positive gender roles among the women and girls and men and boys, so that there is conducive environments that are created for women and girls to practice menstrual health or sexual reproductive health conditions in the long term. So that's in a gist of what we're doing.
Great. I'm going to be coming back later to understand from each one of you, how do you assess the reach of all of your thing and also some of the challenges. But I'm going to now focus and only ask this question to Lara and Dilip. Can you also elaborate on the messages that you focused on? I know some of you said about the gender aspect. Dilip just mentioned about it. And Lara did say that, given the limited span, you focused on the first 80 seconds of the video. But how did you focus on issues like access to water and sanitation for menstrual hygiene, female-friendly wash facilities, SRH issues related to menstruation, and how to hygienically use cloth, etc.?
So I think this is a process that we are still currently doing. We've identified some key messages with regard to our larger MHM project, which we want to push forward. And one thing about our project is that we look at MHM through a slightly, it has a gender perspective, but it's mostly through a wash perspective because it's part of the Tata Water mission. So the aspect of sexual reproductive health is somewhere where we equip our community resource team, our people to actually answer those questions if they come up, but we don't really get into the detail of those messaging. So instead, we're looking at, some key messages such as that we are looking for MHM. We are looking at, the biology behind menstruation, then the aspects of how the PMS period as well as the period time and the nutrition requirements, etc. We're looking at that as one key message. And we're looking at specific behaviors with regard to products or practicing. So do's and don'ts, and the 7-8 key behaviors that we've identified, such as drying your cloth in sunlight, etc. Those are some, again, key behaviors we're looking at. Another behavior that we really want to encourage is actually questioning the myths. So that is something that we are, again, looking at developing things on. And also along with that, the importance of having conversation with your, family, mother, daughters, brothers, sisters, everyone, husbands. So these are some key messages with regard to women that we are looking at disseminating going ahead. Additionally, with regard to our male and adolescent boys program, we are looking at, again, having some videos. Two main key messages is what we think is important. One is definitely the male biological system, because that would help us normalize menstruation going ahead. And the second thing would be, what are the key areas where actually men can support women during the menstruation? So particularly, we've come down to 10 key behaviors that we want to push, and we are in the process of developing this entire thing. One thing that we are keeping in mind, though, is menstrual hygiene is going, we just discussed that hygiene as a whole is gaining a lot of focus now in this COVID situation, and of course that focuses more on hand washing or personal hygiene, surface hygiene, even to the extent of environmental hygiene. Menstrual hygiene at this point of time will be something that is also equally important, but may not be getting the due importance that it requires. So at this point of time, there are so many in Mumbai, the slum areas, everyone's using public toilets. Menstrual hygiene does play a big role in that aspect. And it's important how we can actually push this message of menstrual hygiene through a positive communication. So ideally, we don't have to look at, there is a big fear associated with COVID, but how we understand that fear empathetically and create positive messages is more important. So we are looking at identifying, like say for our larger Tata Water Mission program, we have a behavior center design, a BCC strategy, which we focus on. The primary motive that entire strategy focus is on, it's based on progressive nurture. So we are kind of looking at that progressive nurture, which is primarily that every parent wants that that child does better than them. That aspiration, and that itself gives them an aspiration. So instead of this environment of fear which we're all living in, we're trying to convert those messages into more positive messages and then deliver the same. So that is something that we are looking at doing with regard to key messages.
And you're going to be using videos essentially for this, and WhatsApp and
Yes, there would be a lot of, it won't be particularly going ahead for our MHM program, because I think what has worked for us over the last 2-3 years is the interpersonal communication with the people. It is very important to actually develop that trusting environment and that safe space for women to even talk about menstruation. So I don't think particularly it would be just WhatsApp. So we are going to go ahead with interpersonal communication in much smaller numbers. If we were working with 30 women earlier, we may have to work with 5 or 6 women at a time. But our field teams would then have to do more number of sessions per day as well. So for that, we are looking at providing them with digital tools and tablets, and so that they can continue doing certain numbers in a day, but with the same quality and having that space which women are feeling comfortable to talk about.
Okay. Dilip?
Yeah. One thing that we had to go through when we were aligning to the COVID constraints was that earlier, with Sukhi Baba's philosophy was that enabling conversations, ending stigma is like the core of our work. But we had to acknowledge that as we are moving virtual and we are trying to deliver audio messaging and run a helpline, that we can't expect the same level of behavior change and outcomes that we were expecting out of a on-ground intervention. So we had to break down some of our outcomes and specifically focus on improved hygienic practices, improved sexually proactive health-seeking behavior, and ensuring that the menstrual health agenda is not going back in time and is getting deprioritized. So how can we still make sure that the menstrual health work that is being done over 6 years in the communities that we are working with can still stay where it is, if not move forward was one of the core elements that we looked at. When it comes to hygiene as such, definitely the key messaging around how to keep yourself clean and etc. etc. But with respect to products, there are two ways we are looking at it. One is educating people about how to make their own products with the materials available at home. And two is also mapping down what are the new sources of distributions that are coming into existence. Because the old sources of distribution like schools or Anganwadi centers are not really working down right now, and there are new private-based distribution centers or ration shops that are distributing sanitary pads. So most of the people are not aware of this information. So how exactly can we map down these new updated distribution resources and make them available to the people? With respect to sexual reproductive health concerns, one is definitely the same applies to contraceptives, trying to educate people about where are free contraceptives available and how exactly can they access them. And two is trying to educate people about one of the major concerns around sexual reproductive health is how the number of unintended pregnancies are going to go up with the lack of use of contraceptives or lack of access to healthcare systems. How exactly to avoid that is the second point we're looking at. And the third is just reinforcing the previous key messages that we have delivered through our interventions to participants who have already worked with us. With men and boys specifically, there is an interesting way we're looking at it, because earlier when we were wanting to include men in menstruation, one of the major concerns what we had was why would men do this, right? Like why would men talk about menstruation? Because there was no incentive as such that they could have a buy-in very easily. With COVID, what we have realized is they're really in stress. There is uncertainty surrounded by them. So how exactly can we acknowledge that stress that men are going through right now and push for dialogue, saying that only if you're able to have dialogue with your partners, you'll be able to like work around the stress. And one way of having dialogue is around health. One way is having dialogue around this financial stability. So we've broadened our scope of work with men and boys to more promoting positive gender roles than just sticking to menstruation right now.
And how do you reach out to these men and boys and others? Through the helpline or?
Yes, so it is the same push and pull system where there are audio-based calls that are going for men, which are specifically targeted on acknowledging their stress levels, so that they have their intention to listen and respond, and then we engage them through the helpline on the next steps.
Okay, great, thank you. Now this question is of course only to Sumati, and I would like to understand from you, how are you facilitating the access to the products? And what have been some of the lessons from your app-based distribution and marketplace kind of an approach to the addressing some of the short and the long-term issues of MH product provisions? And how do you think a tech solution like the Sahaj app can play an aggregator role for an emergency situation like this?
Yeah, I think great points put forward by Lara and Dilip previously, and something that we're also trying to digitize now in a lot of ways. To start to talk about access to products, I think the first thing that was needed was need assessment. And this happened in very close collaboration with government machinery, with municipalities. And under the Sahaj initiative, we work very closely with the BMC in Mumbai to ensure that urban slums have access to products. This is one of the first projects we started at the beginning of COVID-19. And while we assess the need of how much quantity, we also understand what kind of product choice would these women have, because that is one of the tenets of Sahaj. We want women to be ultimate choosers of what is it that they would want to use comfortably. And we realized a lot of these urban slums were water scarce communities. These are traditionally dependent on buying water from tankers, and hence a reusable solution, as much as we'd like to promote it at this point, was not a reality that would agree with them. And at that point, we mobilized about 500,000 sanitary napkins across urban slums in Mumbai in very close collaboration with BST, who would help us mobilize it, which is also a key part of messaging, right? When a BST bus comes into a slum to donate sanitary pads, it makes a difference. You have men looking over what is happening. It creates a little bit of excitement, and during COVID, when there was a containment zone, this movement happening was a very strong message from our end that there is a collaborative effort to ensure that women have access to essential products. And that was one of the things we started off with, and then with this pilot have replicated this across Jharkhand and Devgarh, and then also in Jammu Kashmir, where they've been in lockdown way before COVID-19, and supply chains are massively disrupted in the area, and women, of course, don't have access to these products. The other aspect I think we need to talk about is lack of privacy during time for women. We're all staying home with very large families, and there isn't enough space for them to safely manage their menstruation privately if they want to. So keeping all of this in mind, the Sahaj COVID-19 relief program was planned. The digital intervention is interesting because of a few ways, and these are one of the key learning, perhaps a few of the key learnings from this initiative. One is that inclusivity. We realize that including regional languages on the platform, because as much as critical information may be available in English and Hindi, how much is it available in, let's say, Telugu or Urdu for that matter? So we put concentrated efforts in ensuring that, language is available. We have also ensured sign language is available on the platform, because the beauty of a digital platform is that we can scale this to marginalized communities and disabled or communities also. The other thing on the men and menstruation aspect is that we've heard some very heartwarming stories of single fathers, of partners who have been able to access critical information in times when, for example, their daughter got their first period and they were single fathers and did not know where to turn to, and Sahaj became a platform that they were able to use. On the supply chain bit of things, some short-term and long-term learnings would be, first, there is definitely a larger effort that needs to be put in being able to capture and then aggregate data so that relief efforts can work more quickly. We spent a lot of time in assessing this need, and precious time was lost in being able to identify, what ward needs how much. So if we had this information ready beforehand, mobilizing efforts could have been much faster under crisis. And this is one of the key learnings. And by having a digital platform, it enables to have this data to pull out insights and aggregation, and then inform better policy making decisions and better relief efforts. The other aspect in the learning has been that because supply chains are disrupted, maybe it is prudent to now look at a decentralized way of supply chain for products. So do we start identifying local entrepreneurs, decentralized manufacturing hubs, instead of larger FMCGs or other companies who are able to make products? So I think these are some of the key learnings.
Okay. There are some questions, and I'll probably look at them and reach out to each one of you. Anya, you want to put up that? Yeah. So you did mention, Suti, you did mention about the privacy, and so in fact, one of the things that we did when we did a survey in 5 states was on some of these things. We also found that there were issues of privacy, and with a lot of male members in the house, and there were actually significant difficulties in accessing pads, and girls actually switched to cloth because there were no pads available, and so these were some of the challenges that we also actually found. And for instance, in Jharkhand, only the 5% of the frontline workers provided pads, and Jharkhand, UP, and Bihar. But it was much better in Odisha and Rajasthan, actually. And so, yeah, so this is also something which is kind of reinforces some of the aspects that you were talking about. To come back to all of you again, one of the things that we have also found is that it is very difficult to gather data in this time. Now, how are you actually even monitoring the reach of your messages, and the adoption of behaviors by your groups, the audience groups? Anyone wants to take it up?
Sure, Ram. So I think basis on our the COVID relief program, what we did was again, this is a learning that we had from that. So after the 10 days of messages that we disseminated, we did a huge round of feedback. So we did feedback calls, like our community resource people just sat and really called up people with key indicators, that what was the impact, or what could they receive from these calls. We also did Google Forms to certain younger people who were more literate, etc. And we did get quite a lot of data. We did get quite a lot of understanding about things. But what we realized was that it is easier to understand the dissemination of knowledge. It is also easier to measure the intent of actual behavior change, whether they would be like they are interested in actually doing behavior, like the intention behind wanting to do a particular behavior. But particularly measuring the behavior was a little challenging. So therefore, we are now looking at different kinds of, application-based efforts where certain key behaviors would be through application or gamification, etc. You get certain reward points for doing certain, X behavior, etc. And then again, encouraging those particular X behaviors, and then having some kind of a proof through the app itself. They put up a picture of themselves doing something of that sort. So these are certain ways we are trying out. Of course, it is tough to measure behavior change at large. So through digital platforms, it's even more challenging. But our understanding is knowledge and intent is good enough to measure. It's a stable, accurate and measure, but it doesn't really mean behavior change. So we have to bring in another aspect of protocols and processes in place to really measure behavior change. But knowledge and intent was also a good indicator in the COVID context. And now we are looking at how we can take this learning ahead for the MHM context.
Can I add something to that, Ram, on the aspect that Lara? Okay. So I think very similarly, on similar grounds, we've also tried to incentivize and create incentive models within the platform where essentially you can play a game and gamification pushes you towards good behavior. So it's a nudge, and then these points can then be redeemed against products or services on the application. And we've also been trying to do something similar with photo tagging of good behavior. This is something that we're trying to build with UNICEF India at this point. And we do think there is significant success. Just another point that I'd like to add is that now that there is a shift a little bit from on-ground in-person programming to something that is based on low-tech or high-tech, depending on our interventions, I think we need to start thinking a little bit like digital marketeers, and then start picking up things like impressions, where the traffic is flowing, what kind of data is coming in. And our helplines are also a great way of picking up these hotspots and core themes.
Okay. Dilip, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, just picking up on what Lara was saying as well, that we kind of we have acknowledged from a design point of view itself that measuring behavior change or expecting behavior change is going to be tricky with a virtual intervention. So, but what we are also trying to understand is what are the data points that we can pick up which will indicate that behavior change. Like, for example, if we are educating women about different access points of distribution of products, then how much of the product distribution has increased after that intervention? And two is, because we have a helpline where there's a pull model as well, how many people are actually calling the helpline with practice-based questions, and we calling them back and asking, did you really do what you called us with the query for? Like if someone wants to understand how to use a cloth pad, and after the call, just giving them a call in 48 hours and asking them, saying that, hey, did you really try out using a cloth pad, and how did that work for you? That's something which we are considering. And the last point is with improved sexual reproductive health seeking behavior. As much as we have a call to action with our messaging in the push messages, the massive data point is how many people are actually calling to seek help from the gynecologist. And I think that will give us a great indication on how many women are actually prioritizing the sexual reproductive health needs. Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the interventions and innovations that you're all using would be very helpful to actually understand how to actually measure the change and adoption of behaviors, and especially in times like this. I think that's quite useful. We'll just come to the last one, and then we will take up some of the questions that have come up in the chat box. And this is to all of you, that now how can we integrate all your innovations and interventions that you have been doing across groups and communities and in various contexts in the public health system? And can we actually integrate some of your messages with the existing messaging through the frontline workers and programs that the various government departments do from the health, education, and WCD departments? And do you think advocacy at the district, state, and the national level would help? Okay, Sumati, Lara, please.
Okay, great. Absolutely. I think a sincere effort has been put to be in constant touch with government agencies to understand what are their priorities and then try to map that in pushing the MHM agenda as well. A case in point would be monsoons are very soon approaching in Maharashtra, and a lot of mobilization is happening towards preparing for it. We are trying to map that to MHM and seeing how can we educate people to maintain their menstrual cycles more effectively during a prospective flooding and inundation situation during floods and monsoon. Similarly, during COVID-19, since there was a push towards personal hygiene, we tried to push, menstrual hygiene within that sphere. So we are trying to ride on the larger messages and adding MHM as a component in all of these initiatives. And also, I think district administrations across our work have been extremely helpful and extremely rapidly responsive in mobilizing things. We've seen that in Gujarat, and we understand that closely working with perhaps even at a panchayat or district level could prove very helpful.
Okay, so that's quite encouraging. Lara?
I think, of course, the larger aim is that whatever efforts we are doing is something that the government can kind of take ahead at a larger scale. But the issue that I see here is the MHM as a subject needs an in-depth kind of an intervention, something which is much more qualitatively and creating that entire environment, etc. So for that, going ahead, schools is of course a good way to actually have a proper MHM curriculum kind of thing, through maybe, because see, behavior change also, it's not like you can impart all the messages together. It has to be spanned out over a period of time, because too much behavior will not be received at any point of time. So it has to be something that is an ongoing, continuous effort over a period of 3-4 months and etc. So schools and teachers can be definitely a great way going ahead. Frontline workers, honestly, at the ground level in rural India are overworked at this point of time with the entire COVID situation, etc. Ashas and Anganwadis are the focal points for all or most of the interventions going around the communities. So, of course, they are a very good institutional mechanism to take this ahead, but how much time they can invest into actually creating that safe space is important, again, while they are looking at MHM going ahead, because just imparting certain information or giving half-baked information, it can also have other effects. So I think these are two ways we can definitely look at how the government can take it ahead. And I feel more than that, the frontline workers can actually be involved in creating village level champions who then further spread the message ahead, like having 2-3 champions in every village, and they push the message at a larger scale, at a larger with more in-depth understanding, etc. So definitely that is one thing that we would be interested in considering going ahead. With regard to advocacy with the government, I think what we have learned, we are working in around 25 districts, and we have learned that the block level has a great influence on the district level and then the state level. So through our, we have these MHM melas, which we used to do before the COVID situation. After we finished 6-7 months of interaction with the community, we used to get 5-6 villages together and have a large scale MHM mela, and we used to bring the government, etc. inside. And we saw that how the block level engagement actually helped us reach to a state level understanding with the state government. So in Gujarat, then we helped the state government form a helpline at a state level for MHM, etc. So there were larger things which we could do, which was again pushed from a bottom-up approach. And I think we need to push that also, that the bottom-up approach is very, very important with regard to advocacy. So just some thoughts on this.
Yeah, that also came through from Sumati in terms of involving the panchayats, and also something that you mentioned about, and which is basically that you need to actually have the advocacy coming up from the bottom level. And it was also interesting your focus on schools, and I think that's also interesting to take it forward. Dilip, your views.
Yeah, when we went about this redesigning alignment process, earlier we were a really high touch model, right? Like we were meeting each group of women about minimum 6 times, mobilizing groups, etc., etc. But one thing what we had to be cognizant of is that now that we're moving virtual, the way we look at scale has to be different. And if we are already relooking at the outcomes and saying that we will not be able to achieve the outcomes of ending stigma on menstruation and normalizing menstruation, but we just want to focus on hygienic practices and improved health-seeking behavior, then we had to acknowledge that this has to be a much more light touch model, and the scale has to be much wider than what we were looking at earlier, which also got us to the point that unless we collaborate with multiple partner organizations and existing healthcare systems or public healthcare systems, we will not be able to achieve that. So one thing that we are constantly aware of while we build the helpline and the processes is that it should be integratable to any of the existing interventions. Like any menstrual health organization who's working on right now should be able to use a helpline to make sure that menstrual health agenda is not being deprioritized in the local regions. At the same time, it applies for the public healthcare systems as well. So one thing what we are trying to work on is how exactly can we collaborate with women federations? How can we collaborate with an organization like SEWA, which has massive outreach? How can we collaborate with Educate Girls, which has maximum girl outreach in India? So the helpline is being designed in such a way that it can get integrated into the systems and not as a product that has to be implemented by Supreme Court.
Very interesting, actually. We're actually quite almost 11:50, and there are a lot of interesting insights and issues that are coming up, but we would have to probably not take up much of it. Many of those things. I'm going to ask some questions that have come up in the chat box. Lara, you did mention about the frontline workers, and there is a question here. Could anyone shed light on the overburden the frontline workers are in general coping with, and especially during these times? Do we see a need to address that? If so, how? I know this is a broad question. However, would love to hear how to work with frontliners, alternate frontliners, as overburdened staff tend to dilute initiatives. Dilip, you also mentioned about federations. If any of you would like to take up this question.
Dilip, you want to go ahead first?
No, go ahead. I have
So I think yes. The point is at the village level, at a panchayat level, the actual government institutional mechanism is the frontline workers. So most of the efforts with regard to now COVID or the schemes, etc., everything is going through them. So yes, they are overburdened, and for example, if we were also trying to, on MH Day, we were trying to have some activities with the frontline workers, etc. But there were a lot of different levels of district and block level permissions, which we would have to seek because of, wanting to do that because of this challenging time. So I think this is an unusual time. And of course, they are an institutional mechanism that has been built at a community level for a specific purpose. So they are overburdened, but I think that is something larger that a government mandate, the government's understanding on how they should want to go ahead. But going ahead, definitely, it would be important for any program to involve the frontline workers into their existing program, because without that, it's tough to really get into the community. So, and obviously, once the situations are better, restrictions are less lifted, reverse migration is also happening at full scale right now. Like a lot of people are going back, and schools have become quarantine centers, panchayati ghars have become quarantine centers. So these are things that the ASHA is at this point dealing with. But going ahead, I think it would be something that would be more in control, and we would be able to, again, continue working with them the way we used to. So I don't know if that completely addresses the question, but yeah.
Yes, no, I think that will. Yes, Dilip, you wanted to say something?
Just one thing which we have been cognizant of before COVID as well, which has become critical right now, is that the frontline workers are anyway burdened with a whole lot of work. So how can our intervention not expect them to drive the intervention, but them play a support role in the intervention so that their role is being minimized? How can we really expect them to play a sustainability focused role than a primary driving role? It's something which we have always been cognizant
of. So do you have something to say, or can I ask a question?
Very quickly, just on frontline workers, I think why we're talking about overburdening of frontline workers, we work a little bit with frontline workers focus on their MHM and well-being, and heard some very interesting stories from nurses and doctors who are working in COVID hospitals. We've also used some very unusual mechanisms, like we had to immediately mobilize the products for a particular group, and then we happened to use Swiggy Genie for it because we just didn't know how to mobilize it at that point. So I think some out-of-the-box solutions where it is possible is also something you can possibly look at and change the traditional definition of FLWs.
Yeah. And Swati, this question is to you. You mentioned about the lack of supply chain during COVID and the idea of local manufacturing hubs. Yeah. Are there some examples of this working well? Are the local hubs sustainable as business?
Absolutely. I think there are some terrific examples that we've managed to come across and help work with them recently. There are local entrepreneurs and very interestingly, mostly female-led enterprises that we've identified across states. For example, even in Kashmir, we were able to find a local manufacturer who had the capacity. We just didn't know it. So we are definitely working with self-help groups and local entrepreneurs who have the capacity to sort of produce right now, and working very closely also on capacity building for them. So whether it is seed funding or understanding what can we do to help them scale is also part of the Sahej program.
Okay. Lara, this is to you. And so what kind of conversations have you been trying to encourage, and have you had any feedback or evidence as to whether this resulted in a shift to openness? You did answer part of that earlier, but if you want to take that and add further to that response.
Sure. So yes, we have seen a great lot of openness with regard to, with regard to specific behaviors like wash behaviors, water or sanitation, construction of sanitation, usage, hand washing, and also menstrual hygiene. Because the point is that if you drive a positive thing, so say supposing our entire campaign, for example, we call it the Samajhdar campaign, which primarily means that, again, basis on the positive nurture, that every family, every parent wants that their child does better than them. That notion makes, so then that is linked to an aspiration which we've termed as Samajhdar. So everyone then has an aspiration towards wanting to be Samajhdar, like everyone. So it's like one Samajhdar person creates a Samajhdar Parivar, and then Samajhdar Parivar creates a Samajhdar Samaj. So that is the larger thing that we are pushing. And yes, we've seen great results, like a lot of people. So we also have these, different infographics that we put up in communities. So we have Samajhdar stickers. So we actually reward the households which have started practicing XYZ desirable behavior, and we put like Samajhdar stickers on the house, and that creates a social mechanism where many people, everyone says, even I want that sticker of like whatever. So it creates that momentum in the community. It gives them something more to talk about. I feel people, they wear certain, clothes which are clear that these are people who are coming in for this particular thing. So yes, we have seen a lot of openness, and I would also say that based on the Samajhdar model, we've also seen a lot of actual behaviors which have actually happened on ground, a lot of that, and we've got good results in that context. And of course, now with this digitizing of this entire MHM thing also, we're going to be pushing it. But of course, with the context of MHM, we have to be a little bit subtle with regard to our messaging, because MHM as such, even in the communities, it's not like I can put up a wall painting of MHM in the communities, because it's still something which is a long way to go, So you have to do different kinds of tools, etc. May not be focusing on Mahavari as a word. You may have to talk about women's health and push that message ahead, because a lot of people at large in the community are still not comfortable talking about periods. Of course, the people who we have intervened with, they understand that context, and they are slowly, it's a slow process. Over a year or something, the community will feel comfortable with it. So we have to be careful about how we use the tools that we do. I can't have a radio van going around the village talking about menstruation, because it won't be something that the people would be comfortable with. So we have to see what we can do elsewhere, other than that, different tools. But definitely it's important to continue using that positive aspiration and give them something to, aspire towards. So like Samajhdar is an aspiration now for a lot of our communities. So yeah, it has been great.
Thank you. Sumati, does the Sahej or the SR have an aspect of waste management integrated in your communities? As I understand, mostly in this relief situation, and understandably so, is disposable products.
Yeah, I think that's a very important factor that we've been cognizant of. So definitely information and videos around waste disposal has been included. We're also now trying to work with Safai Sathis to understand what are the problems they're facing, and then understanding how we can start segregation at a household level and push those messages also with our communities. That is something we're focusing on. And also with the marketplace aspect, also providing products like incinerators, etc., that people can buy at subsidized costs now. So encouraging both ways, yeah.
So this is not addressed to anyone specific, and I'm going to ask if anyone would like to volunteer to answer this. But primarily, this question is about the village quarantine centers, and we could provide only limited sanitary pad through our women's group initiatives. We have requested the concerned authorities, but still waiting for the supportive response. How can we provide wash, MHM related services or provisions either at the village quarantine center or I think the block quarantine centers? Anyone wants to take it up?
I think providing the sanitary napkins would, if you're looking at providing sanitary napkins, it would have to be done through some linking it with some existing schemes or something which are going on with the quarantine institutional facilities. But specifically for the quarantine institutional facilities, you would have to have that linkage with that, or through the Panchayati Raj institutions, because they are the ones who are actually at the village level managing this entire aspect of quarantine and reverse migration, etc. But for the community at large, I think cloth pad stitching is something that we can really consider, because it's really, I mean, we've seen it really work. A lot of women they have cotton cloth at home. They don't have to procure it from elsewhere. They're using cloth, but also just stitching that cloth into a patch shape is really helping them be more comfortable and etc. So I think at both levels that can be considered. I don't know how cloth pad stitching can be considered at a quarantine facility, but definitely maybe the communities can stitch the cloth pads and to sterilize, through sterilization provided to the quarantine centers as well. That is something we may be able to think of.
Anyone else has a response, or can I go to the next one?
So just very quickly on the quarantine centers, there are essential supplies being stocked up there at a regional level or at a state level, and sanitary pads are a part of it actually. I am not sure if it's happening in other states, but at least in Maharashtra and the little that I know in Uttarakhand, it is being implemented because these are essential supplies.
Yeah, but I just saw Arundhati also saying that in addition to sanitary pads, we also need toilets and proper
Absolutely.
wash facilities.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I think this is from Rahul Datta. Inclusive digital platform is an oxymoron. That said, volunteering as a means for IPC was touched upon. Would like to know how the current panel is working to activate volunteer channels, if any. 2, any intervention on BCC has the challenge of hard to reach population. So for mining and or tribal populations or hard to reach districts, the frontline workers is all we have. Are there plans or dedicated interventions to assist frontline workers or advocacy with the state health mission?
Okay, interesting. Absolutely, I think I agree. Though increasingly digital penetration is increasing in India. So that being said, we are also leveraging low tech and not only an Android application, which may sound a little far-fetched for a lot of communities in India at the moment. So we've definitely mobilized messages through radios and identified key opinion leaders and community leaders as influencers because we feel they really have the ability to draw mileage on these projects. Talking about tribal areas, mining workers, areas as such, this has been actually a focal point for SR since the very beginning, since we are in the business. And we have an exceptional channel of volunteers and community workers in these areas and have been continuously working in mobilizing now MHMS, part of the larger program that we run for these communities. For volunteers, I think with Sahaj, and I hope that I was able to convey this earlier, but just to reiterate is, with Sahaj, we've tried to democratize a lot of things. For example, even this discussion, right? I think this is a great repercussion of COVID, because these discussions would otherwise happen in a conference room behind closed doors. But today it's happening on the internet where everyone has access to these resources, tools, information, and Sahaj does it similarly. So the idea is for collaborators to come on board and start running their projects, start running their campaigns, and start selling their products and mobilizing campaigns on the platform. So the idea really is that we present you with a tool, and then we can run with it according to the community's need and the organization's capability.
Okay.
Yeah, just adding on to that is as we're building this for partnerships, 2 days back I was having this conversation with an organization in Sukuma in Chhattisgarh about whether we can pilot this there, and it was interesting to know that there is only 10% penetration of mobile phones. Forget about smartphones, just a mobile phone as well in this particular platform. So it kind of like made us acknowledge that we're definitely not being inclusive in every possible, right? But we're able to like target the majority of the critical population. And two, exploring alternative options. Like with this organization, we are now exploring on saying that, okay, if this organization have mobile phones, can they become like the contact point for people to come and give us the gynecologist if they have a critical need, right? Instead of they giving a phone directly, it becomes like 20 years back, how are we handling phone calls? We used to go to a neighbor and pick up phone calls and answer phone calls. So is there a similar mechanism that can be explored for them to have access to health professionals as a critical perspective? So yeah, just acknowledging that we are not really building solutions for everyone really helps us look at alternative ways of life.
Sure. Thank you, Subati, Lara, and Dilip. It was very fascinating to hear your experiences. And I'm unfortunately, because given the limitations of the time, cannot really pursue with many questions. I'm sure a lot of people would like to take things up with you offline and pursue some of the things that you did mention about. Thank you all, and that was very, very interesting to hear each one of you. And thank you all for joining us and for being part of the webinar today. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the WaterAid, who is the co-lead for the Menstrual Health Alliance, DASRA and UNFPA for supporting this webinar series. Thank you all, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Ram.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, everyone. We will keep the chat box open for the next 5 minutes in case people want to exchange emails or share comments, questions, and then we will stop. Thank you so much. The next session on waste management technologies is at 1 p.m. and please RSVP in case you haven't to receive the links. See you then.